What happened to the game I love? Device missing the last 3 majors. Nico, not even the best player on his team anymore. Zai washed, got eliminated from Katowice in last place. There's no Canadians at the first CS2 major. s1mple is rifling on Vertigo, and our new GOAT is 90 pounds of pure steel. To understand all of this, and whether or not s1mple will work on Falcons with a rifle, we have to know our history. And as Hegel famously once said, we learn from history that we do not learn from history. So let's strap in and go back to where it all began. That's right, I tricked you into watching an entire retrospective on s1mple's entire career because I wanted to take a break from Hate Week and start love posting about the GOAT of CSGO. Now that book is closed and we can no longer go back and rewrite history, this will enforce all of the correct opinions about what we know about the GOAT. s1mple, okay? And it will lead back to Falcons in the end. So why don't we start here? Because the conversation about rifling's coming right up. So when we talk about s1mple, we talk about the best player in CSGO history, right? Get that out of the way. For me, the main argument, besides the fact that he was contending for #1 for 5 years and got it 3, 2018, s1mple had the GOAT year. Okay? When we talk about how good ZywOo was, and for those who watched in the last few years, you've seen s1mple slowly taper off. You've seen ZywOo reach his peak extremely fast and stay there, and sort of fervently be consistent at the top level in terms of stats. Now, if you took stats away entirely, and you just watched the games and you had an experienced eye, and you saw s1mple playing 2018 to now and watched ZywOo join the fray in 2019, you would see that ZywOo had the numbers for sure, and he also had some big moments, but you can't say he had the same take over the game quality that s1mple had. And when you talk about 2018, the reason that this is a year that ZywOo's never had is because he does that with s1mple, electronic by his side, and then that's it. They do this in 2018 when Astralis have the most dominant year in history of any team, right? Astralis are the best team in history in a modern part of the game and are the most dominant in that period. They put on the land map streaks. They have 5 players in top 20 for the only time in history. They have the best Danish opera of all time, and they are running through events. Wow, I love glazing s1mple, but I love glazing s1mple, especially in my Boxer Movement Club merchandise. If you're a fan of KZ, you love moving, whether it's in real life, whether it's in Counter-Strike, and you've been around since the Move It days, hit up your boy on boxermovement.club. It's time to shower up, get some fresh Boxer Movement Club merchandise. Oh, and launders 10 for 10% off the best CS2 headphones on the market. A zone, baby, get in the zone. So not only does s1mple have unbelievable dominance in this year, he does it literally side by side the same year that the best team of all time exists and are winning every single thing. Even though those are circumstances that he did not foster or create, the fact that he overcame that is what makes sort of no year that ZywOo has had comparable. I'll say that part is, in my opinion, what the main argument is for why s1mple is #1. If you take the numbers away, or do you want to say what's beyond numbers? And in 2018, he's doing this, of course, as an opera. He's doing this as an opera, and he's dominating. He's the best opera in the world, and he's the best player in the world at the same time. But he's rifling too, right? We all know s1mple has always sort of rifled somewhat, right? Basically all elite players except Nico, they can both op and rifle. That is quite special to say. We can say Device, s1mple, ZywOo can all rifle just as well, but they op mainly because they're the best opper on the team. Now we move forward 1 year to 2019. ZywOo has his debut year, and he is opping and rifling. In fact, when Navera joins the team, he actually drops the op on maps like Inferno. He starts playing B with an MP9 on most rounds. Like, he really expresses that he wanted to be a rifle, and so ZywOo and s1mple have this in common. They're not talking out of their asses. When we talk about these players, when we talk about Device started picking up the op because he was a better opper than Fetish, who was calling for his team way back in the day. He ops because he's the best player on the team, and that's typically what happens. You give the best player on your team the strongest gun. Seems natural, right? Well, that's actually exactly what happened to all 3 of the players that we're talking about today, which is s1mple, Device, and ZywOo. Nico's kind of funny because he tried opping, but he wasn't good at it. Still the best rifler of all time, all right? It's just very much special. He just put a lot of stat points into that. I'm just going to put that out there. He is sort of an anomaly for that reason. So we have Device picking up the op because he's the best player on the team, and it's the strongest gun. Then we have ZywOo doing the same thing. And then we have s1mple doing the same thing, but he's getting frustrated about losing. We go into 2019. He's got a new mortal enemy in ZywOo who's coming out out and about to have the best debut year of all time, right? Getting number 1 in 2019. Now, in the middle of this year, what some people forgot or maybe weren't around to watch was that Guardian had joined NAVI. And when Guardian had joined NAVI after Zeus left, s1mple expressed in an interview that he wanted to be a rifler and always has been. And he cited the fact that you as a rifler have more freedom. You can play around in inside smokes, you can use all of your utility, and you're more mobile. All these things are obviously true. If you've ever used a rifle, you know that you can kind of change your decision a lot more easily. If you're an opper, you don't put yourself in close-up combat op situations on purpose unless you're a fool, right? So the problem for s1mple, when he was playing on NAVI, he didn't feel like they could win as much because he was opping. He didn't feel like he could take enough control over the rounds. The funny part is that we'll find out afterwards, he could take more control of the round and he could have more influence on the games on the op just because it's the best weapon. And there's no real way around it. The best player in your team ends up having to op. So Guardian's opping, but Guardian's way into the second half of his career. You know, s1mple hasn't experienced this. He's just starting to peak, right? So he starts rifling, and the crazy part about this period is that it's remembered as a period where NAVI won nothing. I mean, they got last place at Star Series, they got third place at Blast Copenhagen 2019, they got third, fourth at Pro League Finals, they got fifth, sixth at Epicenter, and then that was the end of the season, right? After Epicenter, it was December, and NAVI made a roster move, and they decided to bring Boomich in, and that's when s1mple took the op back. And now we're into 2020. So in this period, I mean, you can look at the numbers, that'll tell one half of the story. There was no blip here. Like in 2019, s1mple is the second best player in the world. He ends rifling, which might be why he gives up the best player in the world to Zaiwu. But if we look at his average statistics from these last 4 events, he farmed. He played some of his best CS ever. And you could see he was just as good at playing with a rifle, whether it came to clutching. You could see he was way more mobile and using that fact. His decision-making only sped up because he could make more. He wasn't weighed down by an op in the back, hoping that his teammates up front could go ahead and find an entry. No, instead, he was the one who was taking advantage of really high-tension moments to make the fastest decisions possible, show that he could hit a spray, show that he could get a clutch very easily, and was really taking to the rifle. But the only problem is the team wasn't winning more. Guardian was not pulling his weight. Guardian was on his way out. So here's a period of success for s1mple, where he shows he's literally elite. I mean, if you ask pros today, s1mple would be top 5 rifle or not. In fact, a lot of people believe that he would still be able to score top 5. I don't think anybody is sure that he could be number 1. That actually sort of lines up with the gun itself, right? The gun is the most expensive gun in the game. It's supposed to be the best gun in the game. If it wasn't, it would be too expensive. So it actually lines up that as CS got harder and we learned that the cost of each weapon was actually pretty legitimate, we learned that the best players in the world picking up the op resulted in the best stats over a year. It's a one-shot kill weapon to the body, as s1mple says. And actually, there's a comment here from 5 years ago where s1mple says that the op is the easiest gun in the game. Well, it's the easiest when you're the best. And I'm piggybacking off of Thorod's comment here. He used to say this and I thought he was crazy for it, but he would say, well, if the op is so easy, then why isn't everyone good with it? And I'm like, look at all the oppers in top 20. But if you look at the elite oppers and the ones that have ended up number 1, you're talking about basically the same players who most people agree would be the best op or not. All of the oppers in history that we think about, you know, like the JDMs or even like the Shiros who op most of the time, we're not clear if they would be elite with a rifle. But again, for me, if you've watched these videos, you know that for me, s1mple, Zaiwu, Nico are on a completely different plane of existence to everyone else. Those 3 guys are able to see things that no one else can see, execute on them consistently, and throughout a year average a rating that most people don't get in a single match in their entire life. When we hit 2021, CS in 2020 blew up. So there's a lot of people who are watching from 2020 onwards. Some people who are doing good research and looking back and trying to put the puzzle pieces together as to what the true stories were. The people who are around obviously have a more clearer understanding because there's so much CS, you can't really catch up on all of it. But a lot of people want to believe that PGL Stockholm and s1mple 2021 was the best year of CS that he ever played. But it doesn't outshine 2018, even though he won the major in 2021. 2021 was half online, half offline. It was a major that, apart from NAVI being as dominant as they were, was relatively uncontested. So not only was he on the best team compared to 2018, where he was contending against the best team in the same tournaments to get the best stats and still coming out number 1. At Stockholm, he had the best roster he ever had with Bit. Bit was like right behind him in Stockholm in terms of stats. So he had a lot more help between him and Electronic. And 2021, yeah, really just felt felt like half a year when we zoomed out. When the year was going on, we got to the major, we called it the NAVI era. I could call it a period at this point. It was definitely denoted by the fact that NAVI were so dominant, but it wasn't long enough, it wasn't strong enough, and it wasn't against a thick enough field, in my opinion, to sort of have the same title as era. And you want an era to be indisputable. All the while, by the way, Astralis are the #1 team into 2020 as well. And in 2020, I have s1mple on my list as #1. HLTV's got him as #2. But I remember thinking, like, if you look at the pure numbers, yeah, you could give it to ZywOo, maybe by a hair. If you watched every game, would you really feel, is ZywOo as good as s1mple yet? I didn't think so. So I had s1mple #1. 2021, he gets that #1. So yeah, 21, 22, 23. We're talking about 3 years where s1mple is unbelievable with an op. And it's long forgotten that he ever even tried to rifle on NAVI back in 2019. It's not even a question of whether he should or not, because there's no other opper on the team. And he said, if there was an op on my team that was better than me, I would give it up to them. A true opper, right? Again, it was established. If you're the best player on your team, you probably want to be opping. That being said, the interesting thing about that is that in CS2, people are not sure that an opper is going to be the #1 player in the world. So 2022, this year is amazing in and of itself. And I just want to bring this up because it's truly remarkable the fact that s1mple could be the #1 player in this year, because we're talking about s1mple, a Ukrainian, his country gets invaded. He's removed from his home. s1mple's mom's stuck in Ukraine. He says at one point, yesterday was my mom's birthday. Of course, she spent it with the lights off. I always say this as a caster and as a personality talking about games. Everyone's got something going on and not everybody talks about it, right? But I do also feel as though when we know what's going on, and especially when we can compare the magnitude, or like, how could you just ignore this? It's pretty insane that, first of all, that it happens, but then also that, s1mple, who has every excuse in the world to like call a day at this point, give up, could somehow, manage to not be the #1 player in the world, but he still does. He still does. And so in some way, that is the most incredible thing that we've seen in this game. But it's at this point where I'm starting to hear things like s1mple's not practicing as much, sometimes because he's not able to. He's demotivated. He's not looking like himself. That's not something I want to necessarily get into here, but, we're starting to lose, I think, his Hollywood love for the game that he had. And I think he's done so much at this point that it's understandable. And I mean, how long is your peak going to be at this point? I mean, he's got competition in ZywOo, but he's already got the chip that he was looking for. He's got the multiple #1s. Now he's got other stuff going on in his life. I mean, it's our world to deliver narratives and to talk about what's going on, but it's also, these are people who can quit whenever they want. Maybe your goal is to literally win a local LAN, like I did once. That was my goal as a player, right? Maybe s1mple's goal was to get the major. It wasn't to get all the #1. It's hard to, sometimes we want to overlay our goals onto other people's. I mean, who knows? So anyways, he has every excuse in the world to fall off here, but he gets the #1 in 2022. In 2023, he ends up playing on an international team. It's pretty clear he's unhappy. I'm just going to put that flat out, okay? They don't get into the stadium, the last major of all time. And this is a situation where I was actually insanely disappointed, to be honest, in s1mple for not doing this interview. I was really hard on BlameF or Device or whoever didn't want to do it for allowing Stair to do an exit interview for the first CS2 major and first major inside of Copenhagen in history for Astralis, like their most important major ever, and you don't get those guys to do it. Well, that's how I felt when s1mple did the exit interview at Paris. I was like, come on, man. I know, like, you've got your own shit. This is tough loss, like, but that's the point. People want to hear from you, as a leader, as a veteran, as a guy on NAVI, carrying the flag for this, like, legendary organization, and I felt like that was cowardly. And then later on in the year, he leaves NAVI, and he says, he kind of has mixed messaging here. It might be out of place for me to postulate as to, like, what he might be telling the truth about, but what it felt like, which I guess here's the statement from him, that he's got other stuff going on and then he wants to take a break from the game. Also, I'll just say that, like, what I'm about to say could also be true with this. I'm looking at this team like, I don't know if this is going to work. I'm going to be honest, that's how I felt, okay? So I'm guessing, or I feel like, or I'm projecting that s1mple also felt similar to that and didn't want to play out the year. I personally think that ZywOo was just going at 100 miles per hour in a team that's working. s1mple's like, CS2 is not looking right for me. Like, he doesn't end up going to Sydney because of some visa problems, then mysteriously leaves the team, then says he's open to play on other offers in the future, then just comes back to play on the Falcons. Okay, it lines up really well. Whatever, he makes a decision. I just wish people would own their decisions if it was going to be the case that he left for a specific reason, or he could be honest about it. But I understand it could be hard to say, like, let's say, for example, he doesn't like the team, he thinks they're bad or thinks they won't work. Obviously, that's tough. So I get it. But again, I would like the exit interview. I would like the honesty. I think we all would, right? And I would like to think that even me, who's just drenched in haterade 24/7, literally not showering, watching Counter-Strike just to tweet hate, just to like ruin a player's day at their lowest moment, I would like to think that I would be able to make a video like this and show some respect for that kind of honesty. And I really do feel like a lot of us would. And I want to encourage that from, players in general to always be honest. Anyways, 2024 Falcons S1mple rolls around, and what are Falcons? Well, Falcons are a team that was built around Nico, actually. So I heard that Nico asked for $1 million and business class flights to everywhere. Okay? I don't know what is 100% true, but this is what I heard. Listen, it's Falcons, it's Nico. There are players in esports that are getting paid that much in other esports. A question of too much comes down to how much you got. And the super orgs, the teams like Falcons who have so much money, teams like Liquid who have so much money, teams like Cloud9, these are super orgs. This is how they're referred to. They can afford different levels, like completely different categories of salaries that others can. So I heard he asked for an extreme amount. I'm sure it was a combination of the fact that it's Falcons, knowing he could ask for a lot, and then also the fact that he's Nico and would literally provide the value that that's worth, I think. It ended up not working out. And then what happens is you've got this chasm on Falcons, right? You have Snappy, who's a tier 1 IGL who almost certainly will be successful. He's the perfect guy to grab to build a roster around. Zonic, which is an incredible signing. Zonic and Snappy is such a fantastic place to build your roster from. Like, I love this from Falcons. Starting here makes perfect sense, but it does gut ends and it creates some crazy offseason, obviously, and some people are mad about that. But in terms of like how you would build this team, that is the right place to start. The coach and the IGL, and they're both elite. Then you get Magis. That's also an unbelievable pickup that makes perfect sense. Like, you're building the perfect team around a star rifler, right? Then you have Sun Pius, who comes in as the best Spanish player, the Opper, top 6 player 2023. Sorry, by the way, I didn't have him near top 6. I didn't think he was that. I think he had a bad major. I think he had some choke events that he has to get over. I got him on Fraud Watch, actually, him and Nerds. He's not S1mple level. I don't have him there yet, okay? They'll get there eventually. They weren't there in 2023, you ask me. That's what I'm saying, all right? Anyways, and now you have S1mple coming in because Boros was the guy that they used to replace Nico. When you think about the roles on this team, it perfectly lines up, right? You have Magisk, who's a star anchor who can absolutely get insane, like, critical rifle kills. Then you have this other part of the rifle core, which is Madden, who you would call a support player, but can pop off like super good quality, knows exactly what Snappy needs from him. Then you have Sun Pius, who's meant to be this elite opera. Then you have their IGL of Snappy himself. Now you need Nico. Like, literally would fit perfectly to round this team out entirely, right? So you have Boros instead. And Boros, he's not an elite superstar player. He had a great major, actually, up until they got into playoffs and had sort of one big choke, and then they ended up losing when they were playing on Monty, ante-up. And so you've seen that he can be good, but he's not really rounding out a team like this. Like, Boros has the most insane backup behind him, but he also has to be the best player on the team. He's not going to be better than Sun Pius. He's not better than Magisk. Like, he doesn't know enough. He hasn't done enough. Like, this is kind of like if you put Tweety Bird on the Monstars, you know what I'm saying, and expected Tweety Bird to carry. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So the inconsistency stands out. They end up cutting him, and S1mple actually is not, it's not a joke, right? Getting S1mple to join Falcons is something that actually fits perfectly. He's rifled before. He's the best player of CSGO history. He hasn't really dipped his toes into CS2, so he could be fully motivated. He's putting a lot of his reputation on the line by continuing to play when he could sort of get out before even trying CSGO and leave it all to question. So he's coming in both as somebody who could reliably be expected to still have a great comeback. So right now he's on loan, which is kind of funny because Falcons had to pay NAVI for S1mple for a month, probably so they could get some practice games into. That's something I didn't say when I made this joke,
Just wanted to tell you guys about how I don't think math is real.
And then they played one best of 3 versus Metasport and lost. So great. Now we've got S1mple rifling on a team, getting eliminated online in a one best of 3 from the Blast Showdown, not having a major to play. Not sure if the contract will be renewed because now there's no officials to watch him in. Who knows what Falcons are going to do next? And back to the question of what has happened to the game I love. And well, I think that if this year played out and Falcons kept S1mple, he should be good enough to lead this team to victory. In fact, besides Nico, I might even argue that S1mple would be the best rifler that you could possibly get. set to round this team out. Well, you've got someone who was #1 a year ago, who's still top 10 if he tries, who hasn't really tried CS2. Like, he could just bring it home, bro. I think he could. I think that Falcons will work. I just don't know what they're going to play next. They're going to miss one major this year, like, just in terms of his top 20 placings. Like, he's just got such a slow start now. But in terms of eye test, do we think that he would work? I mean, yeah, he would work, but this would also be a super team that was in jeopardy of not being able to meet expectations. For the team that he has, are they going to meet expectations? Fuck no, right? They're not going to just win every tournament in a row. I mean, I just got fresh off of watching his ass lose to the Swedish Viking gods on Metasport, so I have no reason to end this on a high note, but I am able to zoom out a little bit, put the jokes aside, and remember that it all doesn't come to one online best of 3. Okay, I'm willing to say that. All right, stop laughing. All right, and we're all here to laugh at super teams. Haha, you spent all your money and lost, and that's actually fun, and I do enjoy that, and I might come back to hating one day. But for now, I'll say Falcons S1mple has my approval, but it will not be a gestalt. At the end of the day, we are well into the second half of S1mple's career. His stats have tapered off, whether he's playing CS2, CSGO, or whatever. Plus now he's playing on another international lineup where we don't know exactly how much damage he's going to be able to do. Half of it comes down to his motivation. Half of it does come down to his skill and ability. And he believes he can do it, which is the only way that you ever could. But I don't think he's going to pop back up into #1 for 3 more years. And it being also unclear whether or not it is truly going to be the rifle that will be #1 in CS2. We don't know what's going to happen with the game and if things will level out and if operas will get better. So there are way too many questions for me to assume that S1mple will ever get back to top 1. I will say never. I wouldn't even bet on top 5, but a lot of that comes down to how well his team is going to be able to play as well. But what do you guys think? Falcons S1mple, will it work? Will the rifle work? Were you watching in 2019? What do you think about how competitive things are right now? And are you cheering for them or not? And do you think that Falcons will be a gestalt or will be just a disaster?